A dying German Shepherd puppy was surrounded by vultures until a soldier stepped in. It was the kind of silence that screamed, a place where even the wind sounded like a sigh of grief. In a forgotten corner of a war-torn desert, where homes once stood and children once played, only ruins now whispered tales of destruction. Crumbling walls leaned like wounded soldiers, their bricks soaked in memories of better times. The roads were nothing more than cracked earth veins, leading to nowhere. The sky hung heavy with dust, stained by the smoke of 100 silent tragedies. No birds sang, no dogs barked, no voices called, only the wind, dragging bits of torn cloth and dried leaves across scorched sand. A world abandoned by hope. And in the heart of this silence lay a dying soul. A German Shepherd puppy, no more than a few weeks old, collapsed on his side, ribs jutting out from skin pulled too tightly over bones. His fur was once golden and soft. Now it clung to him in filthy clumps, crusted with dried blood and mud. His breathing was shallow, his sides barely rising. A wounded leg twitched every now and then, the body's feeble protest against the inevitable. His eyes, dull and glassy, stared out into nothingness. He wasn't sleeping. He wasn't resting. He was waiting for it all to end. Above him, the sky moved in slow, merciless circles. Vultures, they floated in silence, their dark wings spread like cloaks of doom. Some had already landed nearby, creeping closer with every moment, their eyes locked on his still body, beaks curved like knives, their hunger ancient, unfeeling. They knew weakness, they knew death, and they sensed it in him. The puppy didn't move. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes, not in sleep, but in surrender. No one had come, no one had cared, and now, even his tiny heartbeat seemed ready to give in. But just then, a sound cut through the wind. Footsteps, heavy, unmistakable, human, and with them hope. The little puppy was born into a world already falling apart. He didn't come into a safe home or a warm bed. Instead, his first breaths were taken in the corner of a broken street, under the remains of an old wooden cart. His mother, astray, had no choice. The town was full of smoke and gunshots. Every sound made her flinch. But still, she tried to protect her puppies. There were no toys, no blankets, just rubble, ash, and fear. The puppy grew up hearing bombs instead of lullabies. Instead of learning how to play, he learned how to hide. Each day was a fight to stay alive. One morning, everything changed. There was a loud explosion nearby, louder than anything before. The ground shook. People screamed. Buildings cracked. The puppy's mother tried to carry him to safety, holding him gently by the neck. But a wall collapsed behind her, and in her panic, she dropped him. She ran, and she never came back. The puppy was left alone in the dust, one of his legs badly hurt from falling bricks. He cried, but no one heard him. No one came. The streets were empty. Only the wind moved now. For days, he dragged himself through the broken roads. His injured leg slowed him down. He licked dirty rainwater just to stay alive. He chewed bits of paper and plastic to stop the hunger. But the pain never left. And slowly, so did his hope. The world around him stayed quiet. Too quiet. And that's when the vultures came. His name was Kieran. A young soldier, far from home, walking through the ruins on his daily patrol. The sun beat down on his back, and dust clung to his uniform. He had seen many heartbreaking things during this mission. Abandoned homes, shattered lives, but today felt different. There was a strange stillness in the air, as if the world was holding its breath. Then he heard it. A soft, broken sound barely there. It wasn't wind. It wasn't rubble. It was a whimper. Kieran paused. His eyes scanned the wreckage around him. The sound came again, weak, desperate, and almost lost in the wind. Instinct took over. He tightened the grip on his rifle and moved toward the sound. And then he saw it. A small, motionless shape lying in the dirt. A German Shepherd puppy, ribs showing, barely breathing. Around him, vultures circled and stepped back slowly. They had been waiting, but now they hesitated. Something had changed. A presence had arrived that didn't belong to death. Kieran lowered his weapon, his heart sinking. He stepped closer. The vultures flapped their wings and flew off one by one, startled by the boots now planted in front of them. He knelt down beside the puppy. Slowly, he removed his gloves. His hands, calloused from war, gently touched the small, fragile body. He placed 2 fingers against the puppy's chest. There was a heartbeat, faint, weak, but still there. Kieran let out a quiet breath. "You're still fighting," he whispered. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. This wasn't just a dog. This was life refusing to give up. Kieran stood still, staring at the fragile body in his hands. He knew the rules. Every soldier did. They weren't allowed to interfere with animals, especially not strays. Disease risks, security concerns, and strict military code all said one thing: walk away. But Kieran couldn't move, because something deep inside him had already made the decision. His thoughts drifted back to years ago, to a golden retriever named Max, his childhood dog, the one who'd slept at his feet every night, who ran to the door every time Kieran came home from school. Max had passed away while Kieran was overseas, and he hadn't even gotten to say goodbye. Now, staring at this dying puppy, those memories hit harder than bullets. This could have been Max, he thought. This could have been me. Without another thought, Kieran slipped off his jacket and carefully wrapped the puppy in it. The tiny body was cold, barely moving, but Kieran could feel a faint pulse, a small spark refusing to go out. He lifted the puppy gently, holding it close to his chest. The walk back to base was long, nearly 2 miles under the scorching sun. Every step drew looks from fellow soldiers, from officers posted in watchtowers, from locals peering through broken windows. He could feel the tension in their eyes. What is he doing? But Kieran didn't stop. Not when they whispered. Not when someone reminded him about the rules. Not even when his superior glanced disapprovingly as he passed the gate. He kept walking, because at that moment, saving one small, forgotten life meant more than following orders. Back at the camp, Kieran turned his tiny corner of the tent into a secret recovery zone. He laid the puppy gently on a folded blanket beside his cot, making sure no one saw. He had no proper medical supplies, just a first aid kit, water, and the quiet determination of someone who refused to give up. With shaking hands, he cleaned the puppy's wounds using what little antiseptic he had. The pup flinched but didn't cry. He was too weak. Kieran ripped pieces from an old shirt to wrap the worst injuries. Then he opened his rations, tearing tiny bits of beef jerky and bread, softening them in water before feeding them carefully to the trembling mouth. Some of the food fell out, but the puppy licked at it slowly, trying to eat. It was his first real meal in days. Kieran even shared his own water, not thinking twice. That night, while the desert winds howled outside the thin tent walls, the puppy lay curled beside his cot. He whimpered softly in his sleep, paws twitching, as if reliving the horror he had just escaped. Kieran reached down and rested a hand on his back. "You're safe now," he whispered, and somehow the puppy calmed. As days passed, the little recovery mission became harder to hide. Some soldiers started noticing the quiet movements, the missing scraps of food, the gentle coos from a soldier once known for silence. A few of them watched with furrowed brows. Rules were rules. They reminded him of that. One even warned him, "If command finds out, you could be sent home or worse." But not everyone turned away. A medic from a nearby tent, a quiet woman named Layla, who once rescued a stray cat, offered help discreetly. She brought bandages when no one was looking. Another soldier, tough on the outside but secretly soft-hearted, slipped him extra food during mealtime without saying a word. Still, the risk grew with each passing day. Kieran knew that if he was caught, he could lose everything. But when he looked down and saw those eyes, now a little brighter, a little less afraid, he also knew one thing: he wouldn't stop. As the days passed, something changed between Kieran and the puppy. The little one, once too weak to even lift its head, started to show signs of life. It was slow at first, a twitch of the ears, a flicker of the tail, then, finally, a soft, reluctant step. Kieran would whisper to him, his voice soothing and steady. "Come on, buddy. You've got this." The puppy would look up, and his dark eyes seemed to hold a quiet understanding. The first time the pup wagged his tail, Kieran couldn't help but smile. The soldier knelt down, careful not to startle him, and gently stroked the puppy's head. The bond was beginning to form. There was a healing power in the puppy's presence, a silent understanding that Kieran hadn't known he needed. He could feel it in his chest. The weight of the past, the burdens he carried, seemed to lift, even if just for a moment, each time the puppy responded to him. The puppy had started walking again. Shaky, unsure steps, but each day it got stronger, and so did Kieran. At night, when Kieran lay in his cot, the memories often came flooding back. The ghosts of his past, friends lost, the chaos of war, and the weight of his trauma would resurface. The silence would grow heavier, and the dark thoughts would creep in, trying to suffocate him. The weight of everything he'd seen, the things he could never forget, pressed down on him like a suffocating blanket. But the puppy, now stronger, would curl up beside him, offering a quiet companionship that helped block out the noise. The soft whimpers in the night were no longer just nightmares. They were reminders that, despite the darkness, life was still worth fighting for. One evening, as Kieran sat by the campfire, a moment of rare peace settled over him. The puppy looked up at him, its eyes bright and trusting. The soldier found himself speaking, as if to the dog, but really to himself. "I wasn't always this broken," Kieran whispered. "I had a friend once. A good friend. We used to laugh. But then, it all fell apart. War took him." The puppy pressed its head gently against Kieran's hand, as if trying to understand. Maybe he couldn't, but in that simple gesture, Kieran felt something important, something he hadn't felt in a long time. The puppy had brought him back from the edge. The little life that had almost been lost had, in turn, saved him. It was only a matter of time before someone found out. Kieran had kept the puppy hidden as best as he could, but the whispers had grown louder. Soldiers had noticed the quiet bond he shared with the small, now healthy dog. The quiet glances, the soft-spoken words, and the little one that had begun to follow him everywhere. One afternoon, Kieran returned to his tent after a patrol. His heart skipped a beat when he saw his commanding officer standing inside. "Soldier," the officer barked, looking at him with narrowed eyes. "We need to talk." The puppy, lying next to Kieran's cot, looked up, sensing the tension in the air. The officer's gaze followed the dog, and Kieran's stomach tightened. "That thing," the officer said, his voice thick with disapproval, "has no place here." Kieran's mind raced. It had all come down to this. He had known the consequences, but the reality of it hit harder than he imagined. The officer gave the order, "Remove the animal immediately." Kieran's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't lose him. He couldn't go back to that emptiness. Not after everything. "Sir, please," Kieran said, his voice low but firm. "This dog, he's been through more than I can say. He's been with me when no one else was. I don't care about your feelings, soldier." The officer cut him off, stepping toward the dog. "The rules are clear. No pets. No strays." Kieran felt a lump rise in his throat, but he couldn't let it go. Not now. Not after everything they'd been through together. "Please," Kieran repeated, his voice cracking. "Give him a chance. He saved me in ways you wouldn't understand. He has nowhere else to go." The officer didn't reply immediately. He just stared at Kieran, then the dog. The silence felt like an eternity. But just as Kieran thought he had lost, someone spoke up from the doorway. It was Layla, the medic who had been helping him all along. She stepped in, her gaze steady. "Sir, I've been observing this dog. He's been a source of calm for many of us. And I know for a fact that this soldier's mental state has improved since he found him." The officer looked at her, his brow furrowing. "Are you suggesting I make an exception?" "I'm suggesting that you consider the bigger picture, sir," Layla replied, her tone unwavering. "This dog is more than just a stray. He's more than a pet. He's a lifeline. And if we take that away, it could affect more than just one soldier's morale. For a moment, the officer stood silently, weighing his options. The tension in the room grew thick. Kieran held his breath. Then, unexpectedly, the officer sighed. "Fine," he said, turning away. "But only under strict conditions. Keep him out of sight and under control." Kieran felt relief flood through him. But he knew this wasn't over. The rules had been bent, but they weren't broken. With the decision made, Kieran and Layla didn't waste any time. They knew the clock was ticking. Soon, the others would start asking questions, and if the higher-ups discovered what had really happened, the consequences would be severe. Kieran started making arrangements to get the puppy out of the country. Through quiet whispers and discreet conversations, Layla helped him connect with a translator who knew someone in the embassy. They made plans to smuggle the dog back to Kieran's home country, a place where the puppy could live safely, away from the dangers of the war. The plan was risky, full of unknowns. But there was no turning back now. Kieran wasn't going to let the puppy face another night alone, or worse, be put down. It would take all the stealth they had, but Kieran and Layla were determined. The risk was high, but for the first time in a long while, Kieran felt hope begin to stir. The days leading up to the puppy's escape were a whirlwind of danger and uncertainty. Kieran and Layla's plan had gone into motion with one goal: get the puppy out of the war zone, where the odds were stacked against them. Every checkpoint they passed felt like a brush with fate. Kieran's heart would race every time a soldier glanced at him or the puppy, now wrapped tightly in a scarf to hide its presence. Each inspection was a test of nerve. Would the puppy be discovered? Would their journey be over? Through the dusty roads, under the cover of night, they traveled silent, focused, and terrified. At one point, a suspicious officer stopped their vehicle, asking for identification. Kieran's pulse surged, but with a calm that betrayed his true panic, Layla whispered reassurance. The officer, distracted by something else, waved them through. The puppy, clinging to Kieran's lap, could sense the tension. It stayed still, too exhausted to move, its small body trembling slightly. Kieran kept his hand on its back, offering whatever small comfort he could. They were nearly at the final stage, crossing into the safe zone, but as the truck drove closer to the border, Kieran could feel the weight of it all. He wasn't sure if he was terrified of what lay ahead, or if he was already mourning the possibility of separation. But one thing was clear: this journey had become more than just about escaping a war zone. It was about the puppy's survival and Kieran's own redemption. The puppy raised its head, looking up at Kieran as if to say, "We made it this far." It was as if the soldier could understand that silent plea. In that moment, he whispered, "We'll get through this together. Just hold on a little longer." Months passed, and what had once seemed like an impossible mission now felt like a distant memory. The war, the uncertainty, the hours spent in hiding. It all faded into the background as Kieran stepped into a new chapter of his life. The puppy, now grown and strong, raced across a wide backyard, his tail wagging furiously. He was healthy again, no longer the fragile, trembling creature Kieran had found in the desert. The puppy leaped and ran, his joyful barks filling the air. Kieran, standing at the edge of the yard, watched in disbelief. The bond between them had deepened into something unbreakable. The dog wasn't just an animal. He was a symbol of everything Kieran had fought for: survival, hope, and the chance at something better. As Kieran walked into the house, the familiar sound of barking reached his ears. He smiled, knowing exactly who it was. The door swung open and the puppy, now a full-grown dog, bounded toward him, tail wagging wildly. The reunion was everything Kieran had dreamed of. The dog jumped up to greet him, licking his face in sheer excitement. Kieran knelt down, wrapping his arms around the dog. There were no words needed. This was the moment they had both fought for. The silence between them spoke volumes, as if the years of hardship, the fear, and the uncertainty had finally given way to peace. "Welcome home, buddy," Kieran whispered. As the dog barked happily and the house filled with the warmth of their reunion, Kieran knew this was just the beginning. They had both been rescued, not only from the horrors of the world, but from the weight of their own pasts. Together, they had found hope. Together, they had found home. It had been months since Kieran and the puppy had crossed into safety. They had made their new life together, but there was still something missing. Something Kieran had never quite let go of. The promise he made to the puppy that they would always be together. And now he was about to keep that promise. The phone call came on an ordinary afternoon, but Kieran felt his heart skip when he saw the unknown number flashing on his screen. It was the translator from the embassy, the one who had helped smuggle the puppy to safety in the first place. Kieran. The voice on the other end was warm, but there was an undeniable excitement in it. She's made it. Kieran's pulse quickened. She? What? Your girl. The voice clarified. She's safe. She's at the airport. The words hit Kieran like a rush of adrenaline. He barely registered the rest of the conversation, his mind already racing. The puppy, the one he had promised to protect, had finally made it. The puppy that had been through the same darkness, the same journey. She was here. She had arrived. Kieran didn't waste a second. He grabbed his jacket and rushed out the door. The distance between his home and the airport felt like miles, but every step he took brought him closer to the one thing that had kept him going. The airport was bustling with travelers, families, and those waiting to greet loved ones. But for Kieran, it felt as if time had slowed down. He scanned the area looking for her. He didn't know exactly where she was, but he felt the pull in his chest. And then he saw her. A familiar figure, her fur shining under the airport lights. The puppy, now fully grown, sat calmly by the gate, her eyes scanning the crowd. The moment their gazes met, everything else in the world disappeared. Kieran's heart swelled. He moved forward without hesitation, a grin breaking across his face. The puppy perked up at the sight of him, and before Kieran could even reach her, she bolted toward him. The reunion was a blur of joy and relief. The puppy jumped into his arms, her small body landing against his chest with an exuberant force. Kieran laughed, the sound filled with joy and disbelief. She was here. She had made it. Tears welled up in Kieran's eyes as he held the puppy close, burying his face in her fur. All the trauma, the loss, and the pain of the past seemed to fade away in that moment. There was only the two of them, safe, reunited, and ready for a new chapter. As Kieran stood there, the puppy wriggling in his arms, licking his face with boundless excitement, he felt a wave of emotions wash over him. The once weak, fragile puppy had become strong and healthy. She had survived just like him. Together they had fought to make it through. And now they were free. Kieran whispered softly, "We made it, kid. We made it." As the puppy snuggled against him, he knew that the bond they shared was something unbreakable. Through every hardship, every obstacle, they had found a way to survive. And now they would live together without fear, without pain, only the promise of a peaceful life ahead. The airport, the crowd, and the noise faded into the background as Kieran stood there, holding the puppy, feeling more complete than he ever had. The bond between Kieran and the puppy had transcended mere survival. They had saved each other in ways they never fully understood, but would feel for the rest of their lives. Kieran had stepped into that war-torn desert with one mission: to save a life. But what he didn't realize was that, in saving the puppy, he was also saving himself. The trauma of war, the scars from battles both external and internal, had left Kieran broken. His mind was haunted by nightmares, memories of soldiers lost, the constant pressure of the battlefield. But in that small, fragile puppy, Kieran had found something worth fighting for. The puppy, once frail and alone, had found her strength again. In return, Kieran found peace. The darkness that had once seemed endless began to ease, and a light, however small, began to shine through the cracks. As days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, Kieran's mental health gradually improved. The nightmares that once kept him up at night began to fade. The overwhelming weight of PTSD, which had crippled him, lessened as he focused on the small victories in his life, taking care of the puppy, watching her grow, and finding purpose in her recovery. The truth of their bond was summed up in one simple sentence. He saved her body. She saved his heart. Through the trials they had both faced, the war, the loss, the loneliness, Kieran and the puppy had rescued each other. The puppy had healed from the wounds of war, and Kieran had found healing through the love and companionship she offered. Their connection had become a lifeline, not just for survival, but for emotional recovery. Kieran was no longer just a soldier, he was a man with purpose again. The quiet moments they shared, the comfort of having her by his side, gave him a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. In caring for the puppy, he found solace and stability, a way to manage his anxiety and fear. As time went on, the puppy's role in Kieran's life evolved. She was no longer just a companion. She had become an integral part of his recovery. With training, she became a therapy dog, her gentle presence providing Kieran with the emotional support he needed to face the challenges of daily life. Her calm demeanor, her unwavering loyalty, and her ability to sense his distress became invaluable. Together, they attended therapy sessions, Kieran learning to cope with the mental health challenges that once felt insurmountable. The puppy, with her steady presence, offered a sense of grounding, a sense of safety that Kieran had not known for years. For the first time since the war, Kieran could breathe without fear. His heart, once burdened with pain and guilt, was lighter. The puppy had helped him rediscover hope, and in return, he had given her the chance at a life filled with love, comfort, and safety. The final chapter of their journey was not just about surviving the hardships of war, but about the transformation that occurred after. Kieran and his puppy had found a new life together, a life where love, compassion, and healing were at the core. Kieran wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a man who had been given the chance to heal, to live again. And the puppy, who had once been a symbol of hopelessness, had become a living testament to resilience and the power of second chances. Together, they had rewritten their stories. As the screen fades to black, the final words linger. No creature should die alone and unloved. This simple truth resonates deeply, reminding us that every life, no matter how small or fragile, deserves compassion, care, and the chance to survive. It's a call for us to recognize the power of empathy and to stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. If this story touched your heart, we encourage you to share it with others who might need a reminder of the power of love and rescue. Together, we can raise awareness about the importance of animal rescue and give more creatures the chance at a better life. Please consider supporting your local animal shelters and rescue organizations. Every donation, every act of kindness, no matter how small, helps change the world for animals in need. Share this video with your friends, comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to support animal rescue efforts wherever you can. Now, we want to hear from you. Would you have risked it all like the soldier did? What would you do in his place? Would you have fought to save a life, even if it meant going against the rules? Have you ever been saved by an animal's love? We all have unique stories of how animals have touched our hearts. Share your experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear how a pet, a rescue, or an unexpected animal friend has changed your life.